the night of blood and moonlight. The night Freya lost everything was the night the moon turned red. Not the soft crimson of a harvest moon, not the warm blush that painters chased across centuries. This red was the color of open veins, of warnings screamed too late, of a world deciding in one brutal moment that mercy was a luxury it could no longer afford. She was 9 years old when the screams began. Freya stood at the wooden window frame of her family's cabin, her small fingers gripping the splintered sill hard enough to leave marks that would not fade for days. Outside, the forest burned, but not with ordinary fire. This fire was silver, cold. It moved between the trees like something alive, like something that had been given a task and intended to complete it. Wolves howled in the distance. Not the long, a mournful howl of a pack greeting the moon. These howls were screams, agony dragged through a wolf's throat, ripped out note by note until there was nothing left but silence. And silence, Freya would later understand, was worse. Freya, her mother's voice behind her, trembling. A sound she had never heard from her mother before, because her mother was Scylla, once called the Iron Howl of the Northern Ridges, a woman who had faced a bear alone at 17 and come home wearing its pelt. Her mother was not supposed to tremble. Don't look. But Freya had already seen them, dark figures moving between the trees, tall, armored in black that absorbed the silver firelight rather than reflecting it. They moved too perfectly, too coordinated, to be ordinary soldiers. Their formations were ancient, practiced, at the kind of movement that belonged to men who had done this many times before and expected to do it many more. And the wolves, enormous, monstrous, not the wolves of her pack, not the familiar shapes of neighbors and cousins and the old warrior who taught her to track, but foreign wolves, battle wolves, creatures bred for war rather than family. They moved through the forest like a dark tide, ripping and scattering everything in their path. The scent of blood reached her through the window. Iron, salt, something sweeter that she could not name. Her father appeared at the doorway of their main room, sword drawn. He was a large man, broad, calloused, the kind of man who fixed things with his hands and never raised his voice because he had never needed to. His eyes blazed now with a fury Freya had never seen from him, not anger, as something older, something animal. "They found us," he said. His voice was very quiet. Her mother made a sound, a short, strangled exhale. "That means the palace refused." Freya didn't understand. She was 9, and the world of palace politics and royal refusals was as distant to her as other continents. She knew the forest. She knew her family. She knew the pack that had been her entire universe. She did not know yet that her entire universe was about to be unmade. Her mother crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt in front of her. This close, Freya could see the tears her mother was refusing to shed. She could see the shape of a decision being made behind those eyes, a terrible decision, the kind that split a life clean in half. Her mother placed both hands on Freya's face. "You must run." "No, Freya, no." She grabbed her mother's wrists. "I won't leave you." "Freya!" Her father's voice cracked across the room like a whip. She flinched. He never used that voice. "Listen to your mother." The ground shook. An explosion, distant but approaching. The silver fire was moving closer, consuming the forest with a patience that was almost deliberate. Her mother pulled the pendant from around her neck. Freya had seen it her entire life without ever truly seeing it. A simple thing. Silver chain. small oval stone that shifted between gray and deep violet depending on the light. Her mother wore it always. She had told Freya once, when she was very small, that it had come from a place far away, from people who were no longer reachable. She pressed it into Freya's hand. "Never let anyone see this," she whispered. "Never let anyone find it. Keep it hidden. Always." "Why?" "Because you are special, my child." Her mother's voice broke on the last word. She pulled it back together with visible effort. "More special than you know. More special than we have been able to tell you. And when the time comes, when you are safe, you will understand." "What do you mean?" A sound like the world tearing itself open. The door burst inward. A figure in black armor filled the frame, enormous, its face hidden behind a visor shaped like a wolf's skull. Behind it, the forest blazed. Behind it, the howls had gone almost entirely silent. Her father moved. He was faster than Freya had ever seen him. He crossed the room like a thunderstroke, sword raised. That's a sound coming from his throat that she did not recognize. A sound she understood in the animal part of her mind was his wolf speaking through him. Her mother grabbed her arm. "Run! Mama! Run, Freya!" And Freya ran. She ran through the back door her mother shoved open. She ran through the forest, through the silver fire that parted around her. She would not understand why until much later, through the screams and the howls and the sounds of things ending. She ran until the sounds disappeared. She ran until her legs gave out beneath her, until she collapsed against a boulder on a hillside miles from home, gasping, clutching the pendant so hard its edges cut into her palm. The moon burned red above her, and in the valley below, the silver fire consumed the last of the forest where her family had lived. Freya did not scream. She pressed her face against the cold stone and breathed. She breathed, and she survived. And she told herself, with the ferocious, unreasonable certainty of a 9-year-old who has not yet learned that some things cannot be fixed, that she would find out what happened. Someday, she would find out everything. Before we begin, if you love dark Lycan Kings, forbidden mates, and stories that make your heart ache, comment where you are watching from, and subscribe for epic Lycan King romances, where omegas rise, kings fall, and love is never gentle. The Girl Without a Wolf. 19 years is a long time to be a ghost. Freya had mastered it. She stood at the edge of the Midnight Pack training field on a morning in late autumn, arms wrapped around herself, and watching the warriors tear through their drills with the detached expression of someone observing a species she did not belong to, which in every way that the werewolf world recognized, she did not. In the center arena, 2 warriors were mid-shift. The wet, terrible sound of bone reorganizing, the blur of fur spreading over skin, the moment of perfect stillness before the wolves emerged. The crowd around the field erupted, cheering, shouting, calling names and pack epithets. Everyone had something to celebrate, everyone except Freya. She had no wolf to shift, or so the world believed. There she is. The whisper drifted from a cluster of pack members to her left. She didn't turn. She had learned long ago that turning only encouraged it. The wolfless girl. 19 years in this pack, and she's never shifted once. It's an embarrassment. The alpha only keeps her because of Celine. Freya exhaled very slowly through her nose. Wolfless, scentless, useless. The trinity of insults that had followed her across nearly 2 decades. In the werewolf world, scent was identity. It was the first thing a wolf read when meeting another. Pack, rank, bloodline, power level, emotional state. It was how mates recognized each other, how alphas assessed their warriors, how councils evaluated candidates. Scent was the language beneath every language. Freya had none. Or rather, she had one. She had the most extraordinary one she would later understand existed in the world. But her mother's pendant suppressed it with a totality so complete that she didn't merely smell human to pack members. She smelled like nothing at all. A void where a person should be. 19 years of that. Freya. She turned at the voice she actually wanted to hear. Selene moved through the crowd the way wolves naturally do. People parted without quite knowing why. She was not the largest warrior in the pack, nor the loudest, but something in the quality of her attention, the steadiness of her presence, made space wherever she walked. She was 51 years old. She looked 35. She had the kind of face that wars had tried to mark and failed, and the kind of eyes that had watched enough of the world to find most of it interesting rather than frightening. She had found Freya on a roadside when Freya was 9 years old, half frozen and holding a silver pendant in a death grip. She had taken her home, and she had never once, in 19 years, suggested she regretted it. "You shouldn't stand alone," Selene said. "I'm used to it." "Being used to a thing doesn't make it good for you." "Philosophy before training drills. You're in a mood." Selene's mouth curved. "Come. The Alpha is announcing something. You should be there." Freya followed, because she always followed Selene, and because something in the pit of her stomach, something she had learned to trust over 19 years of survival, told her that whatever was about to happen was not ordinary. She had no idea how right she was. The arrival of the Lycan prince. Miles away, on the mountain road that wound down toward Midnight Pack territory, a convoy of 3 black SUVs moved through the pre-dawn dark at a speed that suggested the occupants had decided traffic laws were a courtesy they weren't extending today. Inside the lead vehicle, a man sat in the kind of stillness that is not peace. Prince Matteo Hareth, 29 years old, future king of the Lycan realm, heir to the most ancient and brutal throne in the werewolf world, a throne built on centuries of conquest, bloodline preservation, and the absolute understanding that Lycans were apex and everyone else existed somewhere below. Matteo had rejected every element of this worldview that was convenient to reject and quietly absorbed every element that was useful. He was, by all accounts, a complicated man. His beta, Darian, watched him from the driver's seat with the practiced wariness of someone who had been managing Matteo's complicated silences for 12 years. "You've been staring at that road for 3 hours, Darian said. "I'm thinking. You think the same way other people bleed. Quietly and too much. Is there a point to this observation?" "I'm wondering if we're really here for the investigation," Darian said carefully. "Or if we're here for the other thing." Silence. Outside, the trees thinned. Pack territory markers appeared at the roadside. Not signs, never signs, but carved stones and specific tree May. "You think someone hid her," he said finally. "I think someone did more than hide her." Matteo's eyes didn't leave the road. "I think someone destroyed everything she came from, so that she would have nothing left to go back to." The convoy slowed as they approached the pack's main gates. Matteo stepped out of the vehicle into cold morning air. Across the training field, through the crowd of warriors pausing to gape at the convoy. A pair of gray eyes found his. He felt nothing. No recognition. No scent reached him. He didn't look at her twice. Freya, standing 40 meters away, felt her knees nearly buckle. Because something inside her, something she had lived her entire life without, had just roared awake. Mate. And with it came the first flicker of terror she had felt since she was 9 years old, and running through a burning forest. A mate. Without a scent. Freya spent the first 2 hours after Mateo's arrival trying very hard not to look at him. She failed spectacularly. And he was impossible not to look at, and she suspected he knew it, though nothing in his manner suggested vanity. It was simply that the world arranged itself differently around him. Pack members moved with more purpose when he was nearby. Conversations sharpened. Alphas straightened their spines. Even the alpha of the Midnight Pack, a man who had led this territory for 30 years and answered to no one, seemed to choose his words more carefully when Mateo's attention drifted toward him. Mateo himself moved through all of this with the absolute composure of a man who had never needed to perform authority because he simply was it. And Freya hated him for it. Not genuinely, not yet. She hated him the way you hate the thing that pulls at you when you have very good reasons to stay exactly where you are. She was standing near the storage building, pretending to organize equipment no one had asked her to organize, when Celine appeared at her elbow. "You've moved that same harness 4 times, Celine observed. "I'm being thorough." Celine looked across the field to where Mateo was deep in conversation with the Alpha. "He's here about the old massacre investigation." Freya's hands stilled. The massacre. Her massacre. The words she had spent 19 years building walls around. "Why does the prince care about a dead village?" she asked carefully. "I don't know," Celine said, "but he specifically requested access to the old border records from the year it happened." Silence stretched between them. Celine had never told her the exact location of the destroyed pack. She had always been vague, protective. Freya understood now. She had given Freya a name, the Ashwood Pack, and nothing else. No coordinates, no survivors to find. Because Celine had known, perhaps, that Freya would go looking, and whatever had destroyed the Ashwood Pack was still out there. "I should stay away from him?" Freya said. "Probably. But you're not going to tell me to. I stopped telling you what to do when you were 14, and you climbed a 60-foot tree to prove you could." Celine paused. "You could, for the record. I was terrified." Despite herself, Freya almost smiled. Across the field, Mateo turned. Not toward her. Not quite. His gaze swept the training area in a slow, methodical arc. The kind of scan that processed everything without lingering on anything. It passed over her without stopping, without recognition. Oh, of course it did. She smelled like nothing. She was, to his wolf's senses, invisible. The bond she could feel humming in her chest, this strange, impossible warmth that had ignited the moment she saw him, was completely, utterly one-sided. He was her mate, and she was no one to him. Freya pressed the harness against the wall and breathed through the ache of it. She had survived fire. She had survived 19 years of being called wolfless, scentless, other. She could survive this too. She was very good at surviving things. She just hadn't expected this particular thing to hurt quite so much. The tournament, the Midnight Pack's annual warrior tournament, had been running for 40 years. It was, by pack tradition, the most important social event of the year. Part athletic competition, part political theater. Entirely lethal if you chose the wrong bracket. Fighters came from surrounding territories. Alliance assessments happened in the stands between alphas. Rank challenges were sometimes settled here rather than in formal councils. It was also, Freya reflected, surveying the arena from the registration table. Absolutely no place for a woman who allegedly had no wolf. And yet, she stood at the registration table for 4 minutes before picking up the pen. She would later be unable to explain exactly what decided it. The bond humming in her chest all week, pulling at her like a tide. The whispers she had overheard from Mateo's investigation team, fragments about the Ashwood massacre, about survivors, about a bloodline the Palace Council had wanted erased. The fact that after 19 years of hiding, something in her was exhausted by it. Or perhaps it was simply that Mateo had spent 3 days walking through this pack without once looking at her, and she was, despite every sensible instinct she possessed, furious about it. She signed her name. The registration volunteer stared at the form, then at her, then at the form. "Freya, the Wolfless." "Yes," she said pleasantly. "Can I have my bracket placement?" Word spread through the crowd with the particular speed that embarrassing things travel. By the time Freya entered the arena, the laughter had already peaked and was settling into the more comfortable medium of collective mockery. "She'll last 1 round. Someone's going to get hurt, specifically her. Why does the Alpha allow this?" Freya tuned it out. She was very practiced at that. And her first opponent was a young warrior from an allied pack, fast, compact, trained. He looked at her with the expression of a man already planning how to end this quickly, so neither of them had to be embarrassed. The horn sounded. He moved toward her, and something happened. She had felt it in fragments over the years, in moments of extreme stress or danger, a kind of clarity that descended over her like cold water. A sharpening. A sudden absolute knowledge of where everything was and where it was going to be. She had never let herself fully lean into it. She had never dared. Because if she leaned into it completely, someone might notice that Freya, the wolfless girl, was doing things that wolves could not do. But standing in this arena, with Mateo somewhere in the stands above her, she leaned. But her opponent's first strike came for her left side. She was not there. She moved like water, redirecting, not backward, not defensively, but sideways and forward, her elbow catching his extended arm at precisely the angle required to redirect his momentum, her foot hooking behind his, her weight shifting. He hit the ground hard. The crowd went silent. He got up. He was good. He came at her 3 more times, each approach faster and more aggressive than the last, and each time Freya moved through him rather than against him, using his force and her positioning and something deeper that she could not name. An awareness that extended past her own body, past ordinary senses, into the space where the fight existed before it happened. 3rd round, she pinned him. And the crowd's silence stretched into something bewildered and enormous. Freya won the 2nd match, and the 3rd. By the 4th match, the laughter had stopped entirely. The whispers had a different texture now. Confused, unsettled, the sound of people revising assumptions they'd been comfortable with. She was winning her 5th match when she made the mistake. She looked up, directly at him. Mateo sat in the visitors' gallery, elbows on his knees, his full attention aimed at the arena like a beam of something focused and very warm. He had been watching her, she realized, not in the scattered way the rest of the crowd was watching, not with confusion or amusement or recalculation, with pure, concentrated interest. Their eyes met. The world stopped. She could feel it. Not just the bond warming in her chest, and not just the recognition her wolf had been howling for days. Something larger, something that moved through both of them simultaneously like a current. Mateo's entire body went still, not the comfortable stillness of a composed man, the rigid stillness of a man who has just experienced something he cannot categorize and is refusing to acknowledge what it means. His wolf, she understood later, had felt it through their locked gaze what it couldn't reach through scent. The bond. For one suspended moment, 3 seconds, 5, 10, neither of them moved. Then her opponent used her distraction, and she hit the ground. She lay there for a moment, staring at the sky. She had lost the match, lost it badly, distracted like a novice. But Mateo was already on his feet, already moving toward the arena stairs. Oh, already coming to find her. The prince's doubt. He found her at the back of the fighter's preparation area, pressing a cloth to a cut above her eyebrow. That was deliberate, he said without preamble. Freya looked up at him slowly. Up close, he was... She cataloged this quickly and then set it aside, because cataloging how overwhelming someone's physical presence was seemed like exactly the kind of thing that would undermine the serious conversation they were apparently about to have. Even more impossible to look at than he had been at a distance. The fight, he continued when she didn't respond. You were winning before you looked at me. What you were doing, that's not human. It's barely wolf. I've seen Lycan generals who move with less precision. I got lucky 4 times in a row. No. He stepped closer. I've been watching this tournament for 3 days. I know what luck looks like. That is not what that was. Freya held his gaze and said nothing. The silence stretched. You are my mate, he said, very quietly, very directly, as if saying it casually might somehow reduce its seismic magnitude. Freya set down the cloth. Yes, she said, just as quietly. Something moved across his face, not relief, not joy, but a complicated rush of emotions that resolved almost immediately into the discipline that seemed to be his default. You don't smell like her, he said. Freya blinked. What? 9 years ago. His voice was careful, controlled. I smelled a scent. Once. In the palace gardens, it doesn't matter. The point is that you don't carry that scent. You carry no scent at all. Freya was very quiet for a moment. And that's a problem, she said. He paused. The word he'd been going to say, she suspected, was complication. It's something I don't understand, and I don't accept things I don't understand. That must make the world very difficult to live in. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. Will you tell me why you have no scent? Freya reached up and touched the pendant beneath her shirt. Through the fabric, she could feel the faint warmth of it. A warmth she'd grown so accustomed to that she barely noticed it anymore. The warmth of suppression, of hiding, of 19 years spent being invisible. No, she said. He inhaled slowly. Freya? I don't know you, she said plainly. You've been in this pack for 3 days. You've noticed me twice. Once in passing and once because I apparently moved in a way that interested you. That is not the foundation on which I share things I've kept secret for 19 years. A pause. Fair, he said. She hadn't expected that. Fair? You're right. He seemed almost surprised to find himself saying it. I am essentially a stranger who walked in here and announced we're cosmically connected. Your skepticism it's warranted. Freya looked at him for a long moment. This was not how she had imagined the Lycan prince would behave. She had imagined arrogance, commands, the reflexive expectation of obedience that palace-raised royalty was supposed to carry like a second skin. She had not imagined someone who could say fair and appear to actually mean it. "I need time," she said. I'm not leaving immediately." "Your investigation." "My investigation." A slight pause. "Among other things." Freya picked up the cloth and pressed it back against her eyebrow. "Then we have time," she said, and walked away before she could say anything else that would complicate the walls she was very carefully maintaining. Behind her, she heard him exhale. It sounded like someone who had been holding their breath for 9 years. Proximity. Matteo stayed. He told himself it was the investigation. The border records were extensive, 19 years of deteriorating documentation that required careful reconstruction. Darian was handling most of it, cross-referencing palace archives with Midnight Pack records and 3 other sources Matteo had quietly cultivated over years of unofficial inquiry. And Matteo stayed because of the investigation. This was what he told himself. In practice, he spent an unreasonable amount of his investigation hours finding reasons to be in whatever part of the pack grounds Freya was currently occupying. She noticed. Of course, she noticed. She had the situational awareness of someone who had spent 19 years as a prey animal in a world of predators, and the composure of someone who had learned that reacting to things you noticed was frequently a strategic mistake. She didn't say anything. She simply allowed it. They developed a strange, cautious rhythm. He would find her near the morning drills, ostensibly reviewing something with Darian, his attention drifting toward her training patterns. She would acknowledge his presence with a nod and continue whatever she was doing. Occasionally, he would move closer. Occasionally, she would not move away. They ate at opposite ends of the pack's communal hall, and somehow always ended up in the same conversation with the same people. Their chairs several seats apart, but angled slightly toward each other in the way chairs only angle when their occupants are paying attention to each other. 3 days in, she found him reading in the pack's small library at what was clearly an unreasonably late hour. She had come for a specific archive, a decade-old medical record Celine had mentioned. She had not come for company. She took the record and sat down at the table across from him. He looked up, looked at her, looked back at his page. They read in silence for 2 hours. It was the most comfortable silence Freya had experienced in 19 years, which alarmed her deeply, and she decided not to examine it. "The investigation," she said finally, without looking up from her page. "You're looking at the Ashwood massacre?" A pause. "Yes." "Why?" "Because the palace refused to investigate it when it happened. And that refusal was not... It was not ordinary bureaucratic failure. Someone made a decision." Freya turned a page she was not reading. "And what are you hoping to find?" "Accountability." She looked up at him then. He was watching her with those gold eyes that seemed, in the library's dim light, to be lit from the inside. "And the survivors?" she said. Something shifted in his expression. "I believe there was at least one," he said carefully. "A child. She would be approximately 28 years old now." Freya held his gaze for exactly 3 seconds, and then she stood, closed her archive, and walked to the door. "Good night, Prince Matteo," she said. "Good night, Freya," he said. She walked back to Selene's cottage with her heart beating in her throat and the pendant burning against her skin. He knew, or he was close to knowing. And the terrifying thing, the thing she lay awake until almost dawn examining from every angle, was that part of her was not afraid of that. Part of her was relieved. The forgotten past. Everything changed on the 8th night. Freya had not planned it. would not, if asked, have been able to reconstruct the exact sequence of events that led to the pendant lying on the ground between them in the forest clearing a mile from the pack's border. As she had been walking. She did this sometimes when the walls of her carefully maintained ordinary life pressed too close. She had heard someone behind her and turned, and it had been Mateo, and he had said he was not following her, only walking, and she had not believed him. And neither of them had acknowledged the fundamental absurdity of two people accidentally taking the same forest path at midnight in opposite directions. They had walked together, in the same careful, charged silence they had been performing all week. And then her foot caught a root, and she stumbled, and his hand caught her arm, and in the scramble to catch herself, she had grabbed the pendant's chain and the silver clasp, old, worn, weakened by nearly 20 years of daily wear, had broken under her grip. She heard it before she saw it. On the sound of something releasing, not just the chain, something larger, something she had been carrying for 19 years, coiled tight beneath her skin. The scent came first, a wave of it, sudden and overwhelming, pouring into the air with the force of something long confined. Freya felt it leave her body and did not know whether to weep or run or simply stand there and breathe, feeling, for the first time in her adult life, like a complete person. She felt the wind shift. She watched Mateo stop breathing. He stood 3 feet away from her, very completely still, the way he had been still at the tournament, but different. This was not controlled stillness. This was involuntary. This was a man whose body had received information that rewrote everything and had not yet caught up. "You," he said. One word. She had not known a single syllable could carry that many things inside it. 9 years, he said. You were there. You were at the palace. 9 years ago. I was. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that. I was 12, and Celine was there for a trade negotiation, and I went with her. And I suppose I walked through the gardens. He crossed the distance between them in 2 steps. She didn't back away. The pendant, he said. It was suppressing your scent. Yes. For how long? Since I was 9. She held his gaze. My mother gave it to me. The night the Ashwood pack was destroyed. Something moved across his face that she had not seen there before. Something that looked like grief. Freya. But she was not done. Because 19 years of silence and suppression had broken along with the pendant's chain, and she found that she couldn't stop. I was 9 years old, she said very evenly. My pack was slaughtered. Soldiers in black armor, battle wolves. My parents begged for protection. They sent a request to the palace. I know that now. I found the record 2 days ago in your investigation files. They requested help, and the palace refused. My father died holding a doorway. My mother died buying me 60 seconds to run. And the palace, she stopped. The palace decided they weren't worth protecting. Mateo's gold eyes were very dark. And you knew, she continued, you were investigating. You've been investigating. And you came here not just because of the records, but because of me. Because you thought the survivor might be here. Yes, he said. Did you know, before you came, that the Lycan prince who is investigating the massacre is the son of the king who refused to prevent it? The question hung in the air between them. Yes, he said again. His voice was even. He didn't flinch. I know what my father's court did. I know what they failed to do. I cannot undo it. But I am trying to understand the full truth of it. And I am trying... He stopped. I am trying to find some shape of accountability that is not purely useless. That's not enough, she said. No, he agreed. It isn't. Silence. The moon was above them, pale and enormous and utterly indifferent to what two people standing in a forest clearing were working through. I need to think, Freya said. I know. I need you to give me space to think. I will. She bent and picked up the pendant. The chain was broken, the stone was intact. She held it in her fist. Then she turned and walked back toward the pack. This time, he didn't follow her, and for reasons she absolutely refused to examine, that made her want him to. The truth behind the massacre. Mateo did not sleep. He sat in the small room the pack had given him and laid out everything he knew on the bed in front of him. Documents, notes, the threads of a 19-year-old conspiracy he had been quietly pulling at for 3 years, and tried to find the shape of it now that he had the piece he'd been missing. Freya, the Ashwood survivor, his mate, and the question that had always nagged at the investigation's edges sharpened into focus. The Ashwood massacre had not been a random act of territorial aggression. Too precise, too specific, too complete. The attackers had been looking for something, or someone, in that village. Looking for a child. Why? He sent 3 encrypted messages to palace contacts before dawn. By mid-morning, he had 2 responses. By noon, he was sitting in stunned silence with Darian at the table and a truth that rearranged 19 years of assumptions. Say it again, Darian said, staring at the papers. Freya is not a standard werewolf. Mateo's voice was very controlled. The Ashwood Pack's founding bloodline, her maternal lineage, carries Lycan heritage. Old Lycan, pre-division. To before the werewolf-Lycan split 4 centuries ago. Darian was quiet for a long moment. That would make her a Lycan blood hybrid, one of the first natural ones in 4 generations. Mateo exhaled. The old records call them something else. The old term is... It doesn't translate well. It means something like, the ones who carry both fires. And that's why they came after her. That's why they came after her village. Mateo stood, moved to the window. A hybrid of that bloodline wouldn't simply be a powerful wolf. She would be... The old records suggest they're capable of things neither pure Lycans nor standard wolves can do. The abilities would manifest differently, not just strength and speed. Something else. Something that sits in the space between wolf instinct and human reason. Like fighting with perfect predictive precision in a tournament, Darian said. Like that. Silence. Who ordered it? Darian asked. The massacre. Your father? No. Mateo turned. This was the piece he had been most afraid to find, and finding it had not been as bad as he'd feared. Not because the truth was good, but because he had already, somewhere in the preceding years, understood that his father was not the architect of the worst things done in the palace's name. Just someone who had looked away when looking might have cost him something. The Royal Council, he said, specifically the Council's intelligence arm. They had a doctrine, 4 centuries old, occasionally revived during periods of political instability, about hybrids and about bloodlines that could rival the throne's authority. It was supposed to be abolished in the Reformation. It wasn't. Darian absorbed this carefully. They tried to eliminate her bloodline because she might be too powerful. They tried to eliminate a child, Mateo said, because a 9-year-old girl represented a threat to people who had held power for 400 years and intended to hold it for 400 more. He picked up the papers and organized them into a file. And they failed, he said. Darian looked at him carefully. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to tell her," Matteo said. "Everything, every piece of it. And then I'm going to let her decide what she wants to do about it." "And if she wants war?" Matteo was quiet for a long moment. "Then I'm going to help her fight it," he said. "I'm what she is." He told her everything. They sat across from each other in the library. The same library, the same silence, but none of the comfortable ease that had settled between them over the preceding nights. This silence had weight. Freya listened without interrupting. She read each document he placed in front of her. When he finished, she sat for a long moment with her hands flat on the table. "Lycan blood," she said. "Yes." "My mother knew." "It's possible she knew what she carried. Likely, given the pendant. The suppression stone is a very old Lycan artifact, extremely rare, designed specifically to conceal hybrid signatures. She gave it to me to hide me from people like your council." "Yes?" Freya stood. She moved to the window. Outside, and the packed grounds were quiet in the late evening, a few warriors still training, some lights in the communal hall, the ordinary rhythms of a community that did not know its guest had just rewritten her understanding of her own existence. "The fire," she said slowly. "The night of the massacre. The silver fire. It passed around me. I thought I remembered that wrong. I thought it was a child's distorted memory." "Hybrid bloodlines carry natural resistance to certain forms of Lycan weaponry. Silver fire is one of them. I ran through burning forest and came out untouched." "Yes." She turned. "And the fighting, the way I move, the way I can see things before they happen. The old records describe it as predictive combat awareness. It's a hybrid trait, extremely rare. It manifests as an extended intuition, a kind of reading of probability that exists below conscious thought." Freya looked at him for a long time. "And my wolf?" she said, quietly. Do I have one? Or am I still, after everything, the wolfless girl?" Matteo met her gaze. "The pendant suppressed your scent. It may also have suppressed your shift." He paused. "I believe you have a wolf, Freya. I believe you may have a wolf that would make every wolf I've ever seen look like a shadow of what it represents." Silence. Then Freya laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the sound of someone who has been carrying a weight for 19 years and has just found out it was put there by someone else's fear. And the absurdity of that is almost too large to process. "Wolfless," she said. "God, they called me wolfless for 19 years. "Yes, because the people who destroyed my family were afraid of what I might be." "Yes." She stopped laughing. She pressed her knuckles against the windowsill. "Good," she said. "Good. They should have been afraid." Her voice was very calm. "They had every reason to be afraid, because I'm not 9 years old anymore, and I'm not running anymore. And now that I know exactly what they did and why they did it," she turned to face him, "I want to know who is still alive. Who was on that council? Who gave the order?" Matteo looked at her for a moment. Then he opened the second file he had not yet shown her, and they got to work. War for the throne. The council moved first, as Matteo had expected it, had even planned for it. But the speed of their response suggested they had been watching more carefully than he'd accounted for. Within 2 days of his discovery of Freya's identity, Palace Intelligence had flagged the investigation's new direction. Within 3 days, the council had convened in emergency session. Within 4 days, a strike force was on its way to Midnight Pact territory. He received warning from Darian 30 minutes before they arrived. 30 minutes was not much time to move several hundred pack members to defensible positions, to coordinate with an alpha who was only just being told the full scope of what had descended on his territory, and to have the conversation with Freya that neither of them could afford to avoid. He found her in Selene's cottage, already moving, or already gearing up, as if she'd known. He stopped in the doorway. "You knew they'd come. I've been expecting it since the night the pendant broke." She buckled a strap at her wrist without looking up. 19 years of hiding buys time, not safety. "Freya." He came into the room. "You can leave. Right now. I can give you a route, a safe house, resources. This doesn't have to be your fight." She paused, looked at him. "Those are the same people who killed my parents," she said. "Yes. They destroyed my village. They killed my pack. They stole my childhood and my scent and 19 years of knowing who I was." "Yes. And you're suggesting I run. I'm suggesting you have a choice." Freya was quiet for a moment. "Did your father know?" she asked. "The full scope of it. Did he know what his council was doing?" Matteo's jaw was tight. "I believe he chose not to ask." "That's almost worse." "I know." She looked at him for a long moment. At the prince who had arrived here 10 days ago as a stranger and had spent those 10 days becoming something else. She didn't have a word for it yet, wasn't ready to say the word out loud. Who had handed her every truth he found, even when those truths reflected badly on his family, his court, his inheritance. "You didn't kill my family?" She said. "No." "You didn't choose the court that did it?" "No." "But you're going to fight them anyway?" "Yes." "Why?" He held her gaze. "Because they're wrong. Because what they did was wrong, and because—" A pause. "Because I didn't know for 9 years that you were real. I spent 9 years chasing a scent because some part of me refused to accept that my mate was gone. Now I know you're not gone, and I am not. I will not." He stopped, exhaled. "I'm not sending you to a safe house. That's not—" "No." Freya looked at him for another long moment. Then she smiled. Very small, very precise. "Good," she said, "because I wasn't actually asking your permission." She walked past him and out the door. After a beat, he followed. Outside, the sky to the south had begun to glow. Silver fire. On the horizon. Moving. The pack was assembling. Alpha Ridden's warriors were forming lines. Good warriors, loyal warriors, people who had not signed up for a war with the Royal Council and were preparing to fight one anyway. Selene moved along the lines with the economy of someone who had been here before. The Freya stood at the front. And for the first time in 19 years, standing in the open, with no pendant around her neck, no suppression between her and the world, she felt the thing inside her stop hiding. Her wolf, ancient, patient, furious, it had been waiting for a very long time. "Freya," Matteo was at her shoulder. His voice was low. "Whatever happens, you are not alone in this." She turned her head and met his eyes. "I know," she said. The silver fire reached the tree line. The midnight pack held its breath. And Freya, daughter of the Ashwood, last of the old blood, the one they had tried to unmake when she was 9 years old, let her wolf rise for the first time. The sound it made when it emerged was not a howl. It was something older, and something that traveled through the ground and the air and the trees and the very bones of every wolf in that field, friend and enemy alike, and said very clearly in a language that predated words, "I am here, and I have been patient long enough." The battle for Midnight Pack lasted 4 hours. By the end of it, the Council's strike force had retreated. 7 of the 13 senior field commanders had surrendered. 3 had run. The remaining 3 were dead, not by Freya's hand, though she had fought, and fought with the precision and ferocity of something that had been waiting 19 years for this specific moment. No wolves from the Midnight Pack died. This was discussed afterward for a very long time. How it had been possible, the mathematics of it, the strange, a perfect way the battle had moved, as if someone had seen it in advance and arranged the outcomes with careful, deliberate hands. The old records called it predictive combat awareness. The Midnight Pack called it a miracle. Freya called it 19 years overdue. The Reckoning. 3 weeks of political maneuvering followed the battle. Matteo was very good at political maneuvering. It was perhaps the most useful thing his palace upbringing had given him. The ability to apply force through channels that moved slowly enough to look like justice. He returned to the palace. He brought evidence. He sat in 12 council sessions and spoke with the precision and control of a man who had decided that fury is most effective when it is cold. He brought down 4 council members. 2 more resigned before he could bring them. And the intelligence arm that had ordered the Ashwood massacre was dissolved with a thoroughness that left no successor organization in its wake. His father did not oppose him. He was not certain whether this was courage or guilt or simply the pragmatic recognition that opposing Matteo on this particular ground was a battle the old king would not win. He chose not to press the question. There were some things that the need for a functioning relationship with a parent required you not to examine too closely. His father would abdicate within the year. Matteo had not asked for this, had in fact not expected it. But perhaps the old king had spent 3 weeks looking at what his court had done in his name and decided that the weight of the crown had become too heavy for someone who had practiced looking away. Matteo sent one message to Freya during this time. No words, only a documentation package. Every record of the Ashwood massacre, every name involved, every piece of evidence compiled, a full accounting. With a single handwritten line at the top, "This belongs to you." She sent one message back. Also, no words. A photograph of the pendant. Repaired now, the chain fixed, the stone intact, lying on an open palm. He spent a great deal of time looking at that photograph. "You're in trouble," Darian observed. "I've been in trouble since the first night I smelled her," Matteo said. "How do you feel about that?" Matteo looked at the photograph for another moment. "Like I'm exactly where I should be," he said. "The return..." He came back to Midnight Pack territory 40 days after he had left it. No convoy this time, and no official purpose. One vehicle, himself driving, Darian not present because Matteo had, for once, made a decision without strategic consultation. The pack gates opened before he reached them. Someone had seen him coming. Freya was waiting at the edge of the training field. She looked different. Not in the obvious ways, her face the same, her posture, the same fundamental watchfulness it had always been. But the quality of her stillness had changed. The stillness of a person hiding and the stillness of a person choosing when to move are not the same thing. The first is tense, the second is simply power. She was, he thought, the most compelling person he had ever seen. He had thought this the first time he saw her, though he hadn't had the context to understand what he was seeing. And he was out of the vehicle before it had fully stopped. She watched him cross the distance between them. "You could have called," she said. "I could have. Instead, you drove 4 hours. Some conversations are better in person." She tilted her head. Around them, pack members who had found various reasons to be near the gate were very studiously not watching. Then have the conversation, she said. Mateo stopped 2 feet away from her, close enough that the bond hummed between them like a live current. The council is gone, he said. The intelligence arm is dissolved. The names are in the official record. It's not enough. I know it's not enough for 19 years. I know there is no version of accountability that gives you back what you lost. But it's what I was able to do. And I intend to keep doing more, for as long as I... Mateo. He stopped. I know, she said, not dismissively, not as a way to cut him off, but with the directness of someone who had thought about this for 40 days and had arrived at a place of clarity. I know what you did. I read every document. I know the political cost of it. I know what it means in the court to dismantle something with 4 centuries of history. It should have been done 4 centuries ago. Yes, she agreed. And you did it now. Because of me. Because of what's right. Also because of me. A pause. Also because of you, he admitted. Freya looked at him for a long moment. The morning sun was sharp and clear. Somewhere behind them, a training drill was resuming. The sound of it comfortable and ordinary. I spent 19 years being no one, she said. No scent, no wolf, no history. Just the girl Celine found on a roadside who had no one to be. She touched the pendant at her throat. I'm still learning who I am now that I'm allowed to be her. I know. I need you to know that the bond, what I feel, it's not simple for me. It's not a solution to everything that happened. It's one real thing in a complicated life that is still being rebuilt. I know that too. Do you? He met her gaze steadily. I chased a scent for 9 years. I know what it is to want something real in the middle of a complicated life. I'm not here to rush you. I'm not here to tell you what the bond means or what you should do about it. I drove 4 hours because I missed you. And I wanted to be honest about that. And that's all. I wanted to be here. Freya was quiet for a very long moment, and then she stepped forward, closed the distance between them, and did something she had wanted to do since the night in the library when he had said, "Fair," and meant it. She put her hand on his chest, felt his heart. Too fast, she noted, for a man who projects perfect composure. Beneath her palm. Stay, she said. He exhaled like something releasing. Yes, he said. The rise of the Lycan Queen. 6 months passed between that morning and the day the world changed its understanding of what was possible. In those 6 months, Mateo was crowned king of the Lycan realm. His father's abdication quiet and complete, the transfer of power managed with the efficiency that characterized everything Mateo did that he had actually prepared for. The ceremony was attended by representatives of 47 packs. It was the largest gathering of werewolf and Lycan leadership in a century. Freya was not at the ceremony. She was at Midnight Pack, where Celine was teaching her 3 younger wolves who had shown hybrid traits in a generation where such things were no longer supposed to be erased. Where Freya was discovering, slowly and with the care of someone who had been denied the experience for 19 years, what it meant to live as something whole. Her wolf manifested fully now, unhidden, uncontained, glorious, large, pale silver, almost white, with eyes that looked like stormlight over water. The pack had seen it shift 3 times and was still developing the vocabulary to describe it. She and Mateo spoke every day. He traveled to Midnight Pack twice a month. The throne beside him remained empty. He did not ask. He waited. And he was, she told Celine once, astonishingly good at waiting, for a man who had spent 9 years unable to do anything else. Selena smiled and said nothing. The moment came on an ordinary evening in late spring. Matteo was on the palace balcony. This had become a habit. Late evenings. The capital city spread below him, its lights scattered like an imitation of stars, when he heard her footsteps on the stone behind him. He did not turn immediately, not because he was composing himself, because for one suspended moment, he wanted to simply experience what it felt like to know she was there. "You didn't tell me you were coming," he said. "I didn't decide until I was already on the road," Freya said. How long does it take to drive here?" 4 hours and approximately 17 minutes of rethinking the decision. He turned. She was dressed simply, no armor, no ceremony. She looked, in the late spring evening light, like someone who had decided something and was finished with the deliberation. "The throne," she said, without preamble. "Yes." "The empty one?" "I'm aware of which one." She moved to stand beside him at the balcony edge. Below, the city breathed. Lights coming on across the valley, the sound of evening traffic, the smell of rain somewhere to the north. "I've been thinking about what queens are," she said. "What they're supposed to be. In the history books, in the Lycan Chronicles Darian sent me, which were fascinating and also infuriating, a queen is something granted, a title transferred, something a woman receives because of who she stands beside. And you have thoughts about that. Many thoughts. Mostly that the history books were written by people who had very specific ideas about which kinds of power counted as real." Matteo was quiet, listening. "I have been living for 19 years under the assumption that I was nothing," Freya said. "Wolfless, scentless, useless. I built a life inside that assumption. I survived inside that assumption. And I'm proud of that. Not of the assumption. Of the surviving." "You should be." "But I am done with assumptions." She turned toward him. "Including the assumption that because I'm your mate, a throne is something that comes to me by adjacency." "That was never how I thought of it." "I know." A pause. "But I needed to come to it as myself, not as your mate. Not as the Ashwood survivor, not as the hybrid bloodline the council was afraid of. As Freya, who has had a very difficult 19 years and is choosing now, with full information and clear eyes, what she wants to do with the rest of her life." Matteo watched her. "And?" he said, quietly. Freya looked out at the city. "There are pacts that still practice the old bloodline elimination doctrines," she said. "There are councils in 14 territories that still treat hybrid wolves as problems to be solved rather than people to be protected. There are children. There are children right now, in packs across this kingdom, who are being called wolfless and scentless and useless, and they aren't. They're hiding. They're surviving. Just like I did." Matteo's throat was tight. "A queen of this kingdom," Freya continued, "he has a platform, has reach, has the ability to walk into those councils and make very clear that the old doctrines are finished. Not as a favor, not as a policy, as a consequence." "Yes," Matteo said, "she does. That's useful to me." "Is it?" "Also," she said, and her voice shifted slightly, something beneath the composure, something warm that she had gotten better, over 6 months, at allowing to be visible. "I have been in love with you since approximately the night in the library when you said fair and actually meant it, which is an embarrassing amount of time to know something without saying it." Matteo exhaled. "I have been in love with Ascent for 9 years, he said, and then with you for the 6 months since. And the second kind is considerably better." Freya laughed. And it was a different laugh than the one in the forest, the night the pendant broke. That one had been the laughter of something releasing. This one was easy, warm, the sound of a person who has found, against considerable odds, that the world is capable of being good. He crossed the space between them, and she let him. And when his hands found her face, she leaned into it with the complete deliberateness of a woman who has made her decision and is done with second-guessing. "Yes," she said against his cheek. "To the throne, to the work, to the rest of it." "To the rest of it," he agreed. Far below the palace, in the gardens where, 9 years ago, a 12-year-old girl had walked through a crowd and left a scent that rewrote a man's entire future. A wolf lifted its head and howled, pale silver, almost white, and eyes like stormlight, large enough to make the palace guards step back instinctively and then stop, because there was nothing threatening in the sound, nothing like a challenge or a warning. Just a wolf, under a spring moon, announcing itself to the world. "I am here. I have always been here. And you are going to remember my name. The ones who survived." 3 months after the coronation, a letter arrived at the palace. It bore no seal, no return address. The paper was old, pressed fiber of a kind no longer manufactured in the kingdom. The kind that had been in common use roughly 2 decades ago, before the mills modernized. The kind that a pack living off-grid in the northern mountains might have stockpiled. The kind a pack would use if they had been hiding for 19 years. Freya read it 3 times before she spoke. Then she called for Matteo. He found her standing at the window of the private study. Their private study now, though the possessive still arrived slightly sideways in her mind, requiring a conscious embrace each time, with the letter in her hand and an expression he had learned in 7 months to read with considerable precision. Not fear, not grief. Something that happened when reality rearranged itself around information she had not expected. "What is it?" he said. Freya turned. "My father," she said, "is alive." The silence that followed was the kind that has structural weight. Matteo crossed the room without speaking. She handed him the letter. He read it. The handwriting was difficult. The cramped, uneven script of someone writing while injured, or writing very quickly, or writing after 19 years during which careful handwriting had ceased to matter. But the words were clear, unmistakable. Her father had not died at the cabin doorway. He had been gravely injured, taken, kept. The letter did not explain by whom, not in its first page. And the letter was only 1 page, either because there had been no time for more, or because the writer had calculated that 1 page was as much as they dared commit to paper. 1 page. And at the bottom, in handwriting that grew steadier toward the end, as if the writer's hands had stilled themselves through the act of writing, "I am not alone. There are others. We have been waiting for it to be safe. We think perhaps it is safe now." And then, "Tell my daughter I am proud." Freya stood at the window for a long time, and Matteo stood beside her. He didn't say anything. He understood, was learning, more every month, the specific art of understanding, that there were moments where presence was the thing and words were precisely not. The moon was rising outside, spring moon, large and ordinary and merciful. "Others?" Freya said eventually. "Yes." He says others. Other survivors, from the Ashwood, or from other packs. She stopped, breathed. "The council didn't only come from my village. We don't know that yet." "No, but that's what it means. That's what others means." She turned. Her eyes were bright, not wet, Not yet, though the brightness was at the edge of something. The intelligence arm, before you dissolved it. How many operations were in the sealed files? Mateo was very still. We found records of 11 targeted packs. 11. Yes. And the survivors from 11 packs. Those people are somewhere hiding, waiting for it to be safe. He looked at her. And now they think it might be, she said, because there's a hybrid queen in the palace who dismantled the people who hunted them. She held his gaze. We need to find them. Yes, he said, all of them. Whatever it takes, however long it takes. Yes, and my father. We start there, Mateo said, and his voice was very certain. We start with him. Tonight, if you want. Freya looked at the letter in her hands, at the handwriting that had steadied itself, at the words "I am proud" written in ink on old paper that had traveled through unknown hands to find her in a palace she had earned herself. Tonight, she said. As she turned from the window, she was already moving, toward the door, toward the work, toward whatever came next, with the particular purposefulness that had characterized her since the night the pendant broke and she had stopped hiding. She paused at the threshold. Mateo! He looked up from where he had already moved to the desk, already beginning to pull maps. Thank you, she said, for coming to Midnight Pack, for the investigation, for... She stopped. The word for everything was too large. For the 4-hour drive. He smiled. It transformed his face entirely in the way it always did, because Mateo smiling was not a subtle thing. 4 hours and 17 minutes, he said. I know. I was there. She looked at him for one more moment. My mate. She said it plainly, not as a question, not as a concession, but as a simple statement of fact, the way she was learning to say things that were true. His eyes were very gold in the lamplight. My queen, he said. Freya walked out the door and down the palace corridor and into the night that was full of things to find. Behind her, the maps were already spread. Ahead of her, 11 packs worth of survivors were waiting to be told that it was safe to come home. And somewhere in the northern mountains, in a pack that had spent 19 years in careful, deliberate hiding, a man who had survived a sword wound and captivity and a decade and a half of waiting set down his pen and looked out at the moon. He had heard 3 months ago that a hybrid queen had taken the Lycan throne. He had heard her name. He had wept, quietly, with the restraint of a man who has had 19 years to practice. And then he had thought for a long time, and then he had picked up his pen. He had written 1 page. He would write more. But the first thing he wrote was the last thing, the thing that had taken him the longest to fit into words without losing the weight of them. Tell my daughter, I am proud. Below him, in the mountain valley, 3 wolves lifted their heads, and far to the south, in a palace that still smelled slightly of new stone and old power, a silver-white wolf stood in the garden where it had all once begun and raised its voice to the sky. Not a howl of grief, not a howl of vengeance. Something new, something that traveled through stone and root and bone and reached through all the miles, through all the mountains, to every dark corner where someone was still waiting to be found, and it said, "Come home. It is safe now. I am here." End of Book 1. Lycan Prince Mateo. Coming in. Book 2. The Ashwood King. A father returns. A kingdom fractures. And the wolves the palace thought it buried are done staying quiet. Arkings that any wolf would read immediately. Midnight Pack. Population several hundred. Mid-tier strength. No unusual incidents in the last decade. Except, of course, for the massacre that had wiped out a connected village 19 years ago. A massacre the palace had refused to investigate. A massacre Matteo had been trying for the last 3 years to quietly reopen. "The investigation is real," Matteo said. "And the other thing?" 9 years. For 9 years he had chased a scent. He had smelled it once. Only once. In the palace gardens during a diplomatic gathering. A scent so extraordinary that every instinct he possessed had screamed in unison. Mate. The word had detonated through him like a physical blow. He had turned immediately, scanning the crowd, and found no one. The scent had been there, overwhelming, undeniable. And then it was simply gone, as if it had never existed. No face, no name, no trace, just the scent, and the word his wolf kept repeating over and over in the years that followed, like a wound that refused to scar over. Mate. "The other thing is connected to the investigation," Matteo said. "I believe that now." Darian said nothing for a long moment.